Emily Carson wasn't supposed to stand out. She liked it that way. Quiet, focused, and invisible in her khaki overalls. She pulled her work gloves tighter as she approached the battered range wall at Camp Fallon, a remote Navy SEAL training facility tucked deep in the Nevada desert. A morning sun was already high, baking the cracked concrete. Emily squinted and surveyed the damaged sections chipped from explosive pressure, others crumbling from age. She kneeled, pulled a measuring tape from her utility belt, and started, marking the fractured line with white chalk. The rhythmic sound of gunfire echoed in the background, but Emily barely flinched. She was used to it by now. She'd been on enough military contracts over the last 6 years to treat it like construction site noise. The SEALs nearby were a blur of motion gritty, disciplined and constantly shouting. Their drills were intense, precise, like choreographed. Violence. Emily kept her head down and didn't stare. That was the unspoken rule for civilians. Stay out of the way. Do your job. Don't ask questions. But someone was watching her. Chief Logan Howley leaned against a metal post just beyond the shooting line, one boot crossed over the other, rifle strapped across his chest. He wasn't shouting like the others. He wasn't running drills. He was observing. He had noticed her the day she arrived. She didn't come in timid or overcompensating. She just showed up, tool belt slung over her hip, eyes scanning everything. The SEALs had barely acknowledged her. That was expected. Contractors rotated through all the time. But this one moved differently, purposeful, calm, as if chaos didn't faze her. What really caught his attention, though, was how she moved when everyone else was distracted. She was meticulous. She didn't rush. She checked the angles of the foundation blocks, tapped the concrete to test soundness, and even scribbled a couple of corrections onto the engineer's blueprints she'd brought herself. Logan had seen combat in Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, places where instincts kept you alive more than orders. And something about Emily Carson's instincts intrigued him. She didn't have that wide-eyed look most civilians got during training exercises. She didn't jump when shots were fired, didn't hesitate when trucks roared past her. She belonged, even though she clearly didn't single quotes T. Emily stood up, wiped her hands, and stretched her back. Her t-shirt clung to her skin, soaked in sweat, but she didn't seem to care. She walked over to her supply crate, pulled out a fresh sack of mortar mix, and hoisted it over her shoulder without asking for help. One of the younger SEALs, Petty Officer Bram, cracked a joke under his breath as she passed. Careful, she might replace one of us. Another SEAL chuckled, but Logan said nothing. He just kept watching. Emily heard the comment, of course. She always did, but she let it roll off. She wasn't there to prove anything to them. She had a job to finish, and a daughter waiting for her back home in Reno. That was what mattered. Still, she felt the weight of their stares. She was used to being underestimated. Years ago, she'd built decks and walls alongside her ex-husband. When he left angry, unpredictable, and full of blame, she took the tools and kept going. Every bolt she turned was her way of rebuilding. Not just buildings, but her life. She smoothed the trowel across the wall surface and felt the vibration of distant gunfire through the soles of her boots. The drills were intensifying. Emily glanced up briefly, watching the team reload and fire in perfect sync. Dust rose in clouds from the backstop. Sweat gleamed on every man's brow. It was like watching a storm, violent, powerful, yet beautiful in its precision. Suddenly, Logan was walking toward her. Emily's eyes dropped quickly to the patch she was working on. Please don't tell me I'm in the line of fire, she thought. But Logan didn't say anything. He just crouched beside her, watching as she layered mortar with practiced hands. You've got a good grip, he said, not unkindly. She glanced sideways at him, surprised by his voice. It was deep, calm, and unreadable. "Been doing this long enough," she replied without looking up. He nodded. "You're not bothered by the noise." "Is that a problem?" "No, just rare." They worked in silence for a beat. Emily troweled another layer. Logan picked up a level resting nearby and held it against the wall. "Your line's perfect," he said. She looked at him. "I know." He smiled faintly. She smiled back barely. Then, without warning, the base shook. A low boom cracked across. The range as a training explosive detonated too close to the perimeter. Debris flew. A sharp gust of hot wind hit her like a slap. Emily instinctively ducked and threw her arms over her head. Concrete chips peppered the ground. She heard shouting boots running, and then a hand gripped her shoulder, firm and deliberate. She was yanked back behind a concrete pillar. She coughed, dust clogging her throat. When she looked up, Logan was kneeling beside her. "You okay?" She nodded. And then he did something that made her breath catch. He unhooked his rifle, held it out to her, and said nothing. Emily blinked. "Why are you?" Logan stepped back, eyes on her. No smile, no instruction, just a rifle. "Just trust." And everything changed. Emily stared at the rifle, stunned. Her fingers hesitated, coated with cement dust, unsure whether to reach for it or leave it hanging in the air. Logan held it steady, arm extended, eyes calm but unreadable. "You're serious?" she asked, voice rough from dust and disbelief. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. He just nodded once slowly and stepped back 2 full paces. Around them, chaos had settled into a controlled scramble. SEALs were shouting codes, repositioning behind barriers. But this moment wasn't part of a drill. Not for Emily, it felt personal. She took the rifle. It was heavier than expected. Solid. Cold. She gripped it carefully, the way her ex once taught her years ago, before everything fell apart. Left hand under the guard, right hand around the grip, finger off the trigger. She didn't raise it. She didn't know if she was supposed to. But Logan nodded again, subtle, approving. She didn't know what this was, a test? A gesture? A message? He stood there, arms crossed now, watching her. For Logan, the moment had layers. Deep ones. Years ago, during a mission in Afghanistan, his team had stormed a compound filled with Taliban combatants. Amid the chaos, a boy, no older than 10, stood in a back room holding one of their rifles, an old M4 pointed at no one, terrified and shaking. Everyone else had shouted, guns aimed at the child. But Logan had stepped forward slowly, lowered his own weapon, and knelt. "Easy," he'd said. "That's not for you." The boy had looked at him wild-eyed, then slowly set the rifle down. That moment stayed with Logan for years, not because of what the boy had done, but because of what he hadn't. He hadn't fired. He hadn't panicked. He'd simply stood there, holding something powerful, but choosing calm. Watching Emily hold his rifle, Logan felt something strangely familiar. Her eyes were wide with fear. Her stance wasn't defensive or trembling. She was grounded, focused, steady. It wasn't about the weapon. It was about presence. Emily lowered the rifle gently after a few moments, holding it like something sacred. She walked toward him and extended it back. "You? Don't just hand these out to anyone, do you?" she asked softly. Logan accepted it, reattached it to his vest, and shrugged. "Only when I'm sure they won't drop it." She smirked slightly, brushing cement dust from her arm. So was that a trust exercise? Or a weird SEAL bonding thing? Logan looked at her for a long second before replying, "It's something I do when I see someone with steel." Emily's smirk faded. "I fix walls, Chief, not exactly special ops." Logan turned to look at the damaged corner where she'd been working just minutes ago, and back at her. Maybe not. But you didn't scream. You didn't run. You moved like someone who's been under pressure before. She didn't respond. Immediately. She looked down, suddenly self-conscious. "I've had my share of explosions," she said finally, voice lower now. "Just not always the kind that throw debris." Logan caught the subtext. He said nothing. Just nodded. That evening, as the sun set and drills wound down, Emily remained behind while the SEALs headed toward Chow. She returned to the wall. Her bucket of mortar had dried, and the cracked section she'd been working on still sat exposed. Unfinished, she pulled on a fresh pair of gloves and began mixing a new batch. Her arms ached, but she didn't stop. Logan watched from a distance, arms folded. He admired her discipline. She didn't want credit or attention. She wasn't doing this to impress anyone. She was doing it because she had started something, and she meant to finish it. He approached again, this time slower. "You always work through dinner?" he asked. "Only when someone sets off explosives near my project," she replied without turning. "That wasn't supposed to happen," he said. "We're still investigating the trigger timing." "I'm not mad," she said, smoothing me. "Mortar over the crack. Things blow up, I just fix them." Logan crouched beside her. "That a metaphor?" She paused. "You tell me." They worked in silence for a while. He handed her tools without being asked. She accepted them without. "Looking up, why construction?" he asked eventually. Emily pressed mortar into a corner, smoothing it with precision. "It's real. It holds. You can point at it and say, 'I made that stronger.'" She glanced at him. "You don't get that in every part of life." He considered that. "I get it." She arched an eyebrow. "You?" "Yeah," he said. Eyes distant. "Except, when I fail, things fall apart. And sometimes, people don't come back." That silence returned heavy, unspoken. "I'm sorry," she said. He shook his head. "You didn't cause it. Just ... Some things never get fixed. No matter how much you mix." Emily looked at the wall. "Maybe. But they can still hold up if you patch them the right way." Logan studied her profile. The way her jaw clenched when she focused. The way her arms moved precise, steady. She didn't realize it, but she was becoming a part of this range in more ways than she knew. Before he walked away, he said, "I hope you're here tomorrow." Emily didn't stop working. "I usually show up," she replied as Logan disappeared. Into the twilight, she added under her breath, "Even when I don't want to." And with that, the wall, like something deeper inside her, began to take shape again. The next morning arrived dry and hot, like most in the Nevada desert. Emily Carson rolled up in her dusty pickup truck just after dawn. She parked in the contractor's lane, checked her tool crates, tied her long brown hair into a tight braid, and headed straight toward the range wall. No hesitation. Slung on her tool belt, and began where she left off. Yesterday's surprise detonation still rang in her mind, but not with fear, just a weird sense of clarity. For the first time in years, someone had seen past the contractor tag on her vest. Someone had seen Steele, Logan Hawley. She hadn't spotted him yet this morning, and that suited her fine. Their interaction yesterday had left her with questions she didn't know how to ask. Why had he handed her his rifle? What did he see in her? Did he really mean it when he said he saw Steele? Or was that just SEAL talk to make civilians feel important? She smoothed fresh mortar into a seam, humming under her breath, trying to focus. But the range was already buzzing. The SEAL team was preparing for a close-quarters combat simulation-type maneuvers, live sound, non-lethal rounds. Emily had worked through dozens of these before. Loud, chaotic, but mostly predictable. Until they weren't, from her position. She had a clear view of the mock kill house built near the range wall. Operators in full gear shouted commands, and moved with crisp precision. Emily had always found it fascinating how these men communicated with almost no words. Eyes, gestures, tension. It was choreography of war. Logan emerged from the line. Scanning the area, their eyes met for a half-second. He gave her a subtle nod. She returned it. No smiles, no waves. Just acknowledgement. Then things unraveled. A sharp series of pops echoed out as the drill began. Two operators moved around the south side of the kill house, ducking under a steel beam. One gave the all clear. But something was off. A delay. Then a click. A boom, louder than it should have been. The sound wasn't like the controlled simulations she was used to. It had weight, real concussion. The kind that made the air ripple and her eardrums buzz. Emily didn't scream. She instinctively ducked, dropping behind her tool case. Dust exploded around her. The blast had come from a stray charge, improperly buried and accidentally triggered. Concrete sprayed into the air. She felt a sharp sting on her forearm as fragments nicked her skin. Around her, the operators were moving fast radio calls, hand signals sweeping the area. Emily tried to assess if she was hurt, but before she could react, she felt a familiar presence. Logan. He came from nowhere, grabbing her arm and yanking her behind the nearest blast shield. You hit? He asked, low and direct. I'm okay, she coughed. Just dust. Then he did it again. With one fluid motion, Logan unhooked his rifle and held it out. Emily stared at it. Again? Why? She asked, coughing. He didn't answer. Not with words. This time, he stepped back further than before, 4, maybe 5 feet. Opened his hands. Watched her. Emily stood there, chest rising and falling fast, the rifle in her grip once more. She felt her pulse pounding in her throat. Not fear, something else. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't supposed to be in this kind of moment. And yet, standing there holding that rifle, feeling the weight and power of it, she didn't feel like she was intruding. She felt like she belonged. A junior SEAL jogged over, spotting her. His brows lifted. Chief, she's fine, Logan said firmly. Emily slowly lowered the weapon and handed it back. This time, she didn't ask why. Instead, she said, You really don't believe in panic, do you? Logan gave a small smile. No, I believe in reactions. Yours are solid. Emily looked down at her dusty boots. The mortar splattered across her jeans. Well, I react better with a trowel. Logan's smile widened slightly. Maybe, but you stood still in a storm. That matters. Minutes later, the commander called. Off the drill. The damaged section would be sealed, and the operators debriefed. Logan stayed behind, watching the clean dash up. Emily went back to her wall. She rechecked the cracked area and smoothed another line. Her hands didn't shake, not even once. Something inside her had changed, subtle but unshakable. Later that afternoon, as things calmed, Logan approached again. This time, he didn't come with a weapon. You ever shoot before? He asked. Emily hesitated, then nodded. Long time ago. My ex taught me. Before he taught me how to be afraid. Logan's brow furrowed. He hurt you? Emily kept her eyes on the trowel in her hand. Yeah, but I got out. I rebuilt. Like everything else. He said nothing at first. Then, that steel I mentioned? Now you know what I meant? She didn't reply. Didn't need to. The desert sun was dropping low, casting long shadows across the range. The cracks in the wall no longer looked weak. They looked like scars, sealed but visible. Proof of survival, just like hers. Logan Hawley had trained in nearly every terrain imaginable: jungle, desert, mountains, sea, but nothing felt as unpredictable as a conversation with Emily Carson. She didn't talk much. didn't volunteer her pain or puff up her past. Yet, every sentence carried more weight than some soldiers' whole career files. That day's explosion had changed something, not just in the rhythm of the bass, but between them. Later that evening, after most personnel had cleared out, Logan returned to the range. Emily was still there, kneeling by the wall with a headlamp strapped to her forehead, smoothing the last section with slow, steady care. She didn't look up. "They teach you to hover?" Logan smirked. "Only when the mission's worth observing." Emily chuckled quietly and kept working. "You're not here to help, are you?" "I brought something," he said. She finally turned, wiping her hands. "Please tell me it's dinner." He held up a brown bag. "Leftover chow. Not glamorous, but edible." She sat back, brushing cement off her thighs. "I've eaten worse." They sat on a pair of upturned crates, chewing in companionable silence as the stars began to blink to life overhead. After a few minutes, Emily broke the quiet. "So what's with the rifle?" Logan didn't pretend to misunderstand. He chewed for a beat, swallowed, then said, "It's trust. Simple as that." She gave him a skeptical glance. "Trust is handing me a flashlight." That was a loaded weapon. Logan leaned back. "Exactly. I don't hand that over unless I believe the person holding it won't do anything stupid." "You weren't testing me?" "Not exactly. I was remembering." Emily waited, sensing something deeper behind the words. Logan rubbed the scar that ran from his temple to his cheek. "Years ago, during a night op in the Korangal Valley, we entered a compound where intel said a high-value target was hiding. Place was crawling with hostiles. Cleared one room, then moved into another, and there was a kid, 9, maybe 10, holding an AK like it weighed 50 pounds. Emily's breath caught, her sandwich forgotten. He wasn't aiming it, Logan sighed, just standing, shaking, but scared. My guys shouted, "Weapons up!" But I couldn't do it. I stepped in front of them, slowly, and said nothing. Just watched him. "What happened?" she whispered. Logan's voice lowered. He set it down, sat on the floor, and cried. His father was dead in the next room. Emily looked away, jaw tight. "And you never forgot it?" "No," Logan said, "because the difference between that kid firing or not was seconds. And presence. That calm in a storm. That's what I saw in you." She swallowed hard. "I'm not a child soldier, Chief." "No, but you've held weapons of a different kind," he replied gently. "Pain, pressure, people judging you by a tool belt instead of your spine." Emily blinked back the sting in her eyes. "You really see all that?" "I see what doesn't shake when everything else does." The moon climbed higher, casting silver across the sand. Emily stared at the half-finished wall, its layers clean and even. This job? It was supposed to be just 3 days. In and out, no attachments. Logan gave her a sidelong look. Life doesn't always follow the work order. Emily chuckled dryly. "Tell that to my daughter. She thinks I'm building bases and fighting aliens." "You told her that?" "Only once. She was 7. Had a nightmare about monsters. So I told her I fix walls where heroes train. It made her feel safer." Logan smiled. "She sounds like you." "She's stronger," Emily said, her voice soft now. "She doesn't know it yet, but she's made of granite." Logan leaned forward. "You ever take her shooting?" Emily hesitated. "I haven't touched a weapon since I left my ex. Thought maybe I didn't deserve to." His eyes locked on hers. "You do, more than you know." Silence again. But this one was softer. No tension. Just 2 people sitting in the dark, sharing old wounds. Finally, Logan stood. "Drills resume tomorrow. Simulated breach. It's loud. You should probably stay." "Clear," I'll be here, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Seriously? She nodded. If things go sideways, someone has to patch the holes. Logan chuckled. Fair point. Just don't catch another blast. Emily gave him a sideways glance. Only if you keep throwing rifles at me. He smiled as he walked away, voice fading. Into the dark. Deal. As the night deepened and wind picked up, Emily stared at the wall again, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was repairing something broken. She felt like she was building something that could finally last. The simulated breach drill began before sunrise. Camp. Fallon buzzed with pre-dawn energy as SEALs moved like shadows across the sand, checking gear, syncing comms, prepping for an exercise that would last hours. Emily Carson had already been at the wall for nearly 30 minutes. The cold air didn't bother her. The silence did. It was the kind that made old memories stir unwelcome ones. She focused on the fresh cement, wiping her trowel between strokes. Every scrape of mortar felt like resistance leaving her body. She wasn't just fixing a wall anymore. She was grounding herself. Morning, came a voice behind her. Logan. Don't you ever sleep? She asked, not looking up. Only when I'm not thinking, he replied. Emily gave a dry chuckle. Then I guess I know why I'm always tired. Logan crouched beside her, watching her hands work. You ever think of quitting this life? Which one? She asked. The one where I build things, or the one where everything falls apart? Just after I fix it? Logan didn't push. He waited. She kept working for a long beat, then finally sat back and pulled off her gloves. Her fingers were cracked and stained, but steady. I used to be a wife, she began. Marine wife. That's how it started. He didn't interrupt. I married young. Thought I was marrying strength, discipline, courage. But the uniform doesn't make the man. After the second deployment, he came back angry. Changed. He drank. He hit. And he always made sure to remind me that no one would believe me over a soldier. Logan's jaw tightened. Emily looked down. I stayed longer than I should have. I thought I could fix him like I fix walls. Like a hairline crack, patch it early, and it'll hold. But people aren't cement. What made you leave? Logan asked softly. My daughter, she said. One night, he screamed at her for spilling milk. She was 5. I stepped between them, and he hit me instead. That was the moment. I packed a bag, took her hand, and walked out. Never went back. The quiet between them stretched wide and heavy. Logan didn't offer pity-only presence. Worked odd jobs, moved town to town, Emily continued. Finally got certified in construction management. Picked up contracts where I could. Kept my head down. Learned to disappear. You didn't disappear, Logan said. She looked up. You endured, he added. And rebuilt. Emily exhaled slowly. He still sends emails sometimes. Tells me I ruined him. That I was weak. You weren't weak, Logan said. You were strong enough to walk away. That's harder than staying. She blinked, surprised by how much those words meant coming from him. You ever lose someone? She asked suddenly. Logan's expression changed. It was subtle but unmistakable, a flicker of pain, just beneath the surface. Teammate. Name was Rios. We were tight. He had my 6 through hell. On our last stop together, we were clearing a hostage site. Things went sideways. He got hit while pulling a child to cover. Emily swallowed. Did he make it? Logan shook his head. I got the kid out, but Rios didn't survive. I was 5 seconds too late. You blame yourself, she said. Every day, he replied. They sat in silence, staring at the partially repaired wall in front of them, both carrying pieces of invisible debris. Logan finally broke the quiet. You know, when I handed you my rifle that first time, I wasn't sure why. I just knew you wouldn't panic. But yesterday, when that blast hit and you steadied again, that confirmed it. You don't crack under pressure. I've had a lot of practice, Emily said. That's not practice. That's instinct. She looked at him, eyes steady. I don't know what this thing is between us, Chief. I came here to fix a wall, not open old wounds. Logan nodded. I didn't expect it either. I don't usually talk about Rios or anything off mission. Then why me? He hesitated. Because you're the only person I've met in years who looks at this place and sees something worth fixing. Emily looked away, the heat rising behind her eyes. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just good at hiding the cracks, she whispered. Logan shook his head. You don't hide them. You build around them. That's what makes your foundation stronger. A voice crackled through Logan's radio. Drill Phase 2. He stood, adjusting his vest. You be careful today, Emily said. I will, he replied, then paused. And Emily? Yeah? Your ex was wrong. You didn't ruin anything. You survived everything. Then he turned and jogged toward the range, disappearing into the dust and sun. Emily stood there, breathing slowly. Then she pulled on her gloves, walked up to the wall, and whispered to herself, Keep building. The siren sounded at 0930 sharp, shrill, and unmistakable. It marked the start of the final phase of the drill, a simulated base breach, meant to replicate a worst-case scenario, unpredictable chaos, fast-moving threats, no script. The kind of training SEALs lived for. Emily Carson wasn't meant to be anywhere near the action. She had already been warned by Logan and the range commander alike to stay outside the red zone perimeter. But the damage near the southern fuel shed from yesterday's blast had forced her to double-check the structural integrity of the fencing. And that meant she was still on site. Wearing her safety vest and helmet, Emily knelt near the southeast generator station, inspecting the stability of an overhead conduit. When the second siren hit, the simulated breach had begun. She heard boots pounding across the gravel, followed by the sharp arc of radio chatter. From her crouched position, she caught movement SEALs racing toward the kill house. Smoke charges filling the air, gunfire echoing in every direction. She didn't move. Because she was frozen, but because she was calculating. That's when she heard it. A scream. It wasn't part of the exercise. She turned toward the commotion and saw 2 men contractors like her trapped beneath a partially collapsed maintenance shed. The back wall had buckled, and a corner of the metal roof had caved in, likely due to structural damage from the previous day that hadn't been flagged. The operators were too far, already deep into their simulation. The radios were locked into drill cones. No one was responding. Without a second thought, Emily ran. Through the smoke, under live-sounding blanks and training flashbangs, she sprinted across the gravel yard and dropped to her knees beside the wreckage. Can you move? She shouted, grabbing at the twisted frame. One man, bleeding from the forehead, was semi-conscious. The other was wedged under a support beam. She crawled under part of the roof, ignoring the sharp edges that tore at her jeans. With all her strength, she lifted the beam just enough to let the second man slide out. He coughed violently and collapsed. Beside her, clutching his ribs. You're okay, she told them both. You're okay. Stay here. She pulled the first man's arm over her shoulders, and inch by inch helped him limp toward the clear zone. Her body strained with the weight, but her legs never faltered. And in that moment, Emily didn't feel like a contractor. She felt like a damn soldier. Unbeknownst to her, the entire event was being broadcast via drone footage to the Central Command tent, where SEAL instructors and officers monitored the exercise. Logan Hall stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the screen. At first, it didn't register what he was seeing. Smoke blurred the camera feed. Then he recognized the braid, the vest, the fearless movement into danger. Pause playback. Logan ordered. The technician froze the frame. Emily, dragging a bleeding man out of a collapsed structure. No flinching, no hesitation. Just focus. She's a contractor, one of the officers said, baffled. She shouldn't even be in that sector. She was supposed to be gone hours ago. Another muttered. Logan watched the footage 3 times. Silent, unmoving, until the commander turned to him. Chief? She's not just a contractor, Logan said. She's something else. By the time Emily got the second man to safety, a medic team was on site. The 2 injured workers were taken to the camp infirmary. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to have mattered. Emily sat on the gravel, covered in dirt and blood that wasn't hers, breathing hard but calm. Logan appeared beside her a few minutes later. He crouched down, handed her a water bottle. Didn't flinch, he said. She unscrewed the cap and drank half of it in one go. Didn't have time to? You could have waited, called it in. They didn't have time either. He looked at her with something deeper than respect. Something nearing awe. We watched it on drone replay, he said. Everyone saw. She grimaced. Perfect. That's what I need more attention. You earned every bit of it, she shrugged. It's not about earning. It's about doing what's right. Funny, Logan said. That's exactly what my best teammate used to say. She looked at him, surprised. The one who? Yeah. He nodded. Rios would have liked you. Emily stood, dusted off her hands. Then I'll take that as the highest compliment I've ever gotten. Later that afternoon, the range commander gathered the operators and contractors for a debrief. Emily stood off to the side, trying to avoid the spotlight. Didn't work. The commander played a short clip from the drone footage, pausing it on the moment Emily carried the injured worker across the yard. No training. No body armor. No hesitation, he said. This is what courage looks like. The entire tent applauded. Logan didn't clap. He didn't have to. He just gave her that familiar nod, the same one he gave to men who'd earned their place through blood, grit, and unshakable will. Emily didn't say much the rest of the day. She just packed up her gear, wiped her tools, and returned to her wall, because praise didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd stood her ground again. And this time, everyone saw it. The days after the incident felt different. Everywhere Emily Carson walked, eyes followed. Not with suspicion anymore, but respect. SEALs nodded at her in passing. Instructors greeted her by name, and junior trainees watched her like she was part of the team. She didn't know how to feel about it. She hadn't changed. But something had shifted. The wall repair had been completed 2 days ahead of schedule. Emily could have packed up and moved to her next job. That had always been her rhythm: fix, finish, flee. But for some reason, this time, her boots hesitated. Logan Hawley noticed. Still here? He asked, leaning against a Humvee where she sat eating a protein bar. Didn't want to leave the job half done, she replied. The wall's done. Yeah, she said, but there's still cracks. Logan sat beside her. You mean in the structure or in us? She gave a soft chuckle. Maybe both. He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled a folded paper from his back pocket and handed it to her. What's this? She asked. An invitation. She unfolded it slowly. It was an official Camp Fallon clearance pass for civilian integration into Phase 1 SEAL readiness training. Is this a joke? She said. No joke, Logan replied. You already passed the toughest test, reacting under pressure. Command watched your footage 10 times. They want to see if that instinct is real and if it can be shaped. But I'm not military. Emily said, I don't even know how to hold a sidearm properly. You held mine just fine. That was instinct. Exactly. Emily studied the paper again. Her name printed next to the word civilian qualification invite. She'd never seen anything like it. This isn't normal, is it? No, Logan admitted, but neither are you. For the next few days, Emily observed the SEALs as they trained. Logan had gotten her a temporary observer's vest bright orange, like a construction site, but it gave her full access to their operations. She studied the drills, watched how they moved, communicated, led. Everything in her mind began clicking into place. She wasn't trying to become one of them. She was learning why they were who they were, and something inside her wanted more. One evening, Logan invited her to the shooting range. "Only if you're ready," he said. She looked at the paper again. "I think I need to be." The sun was setting as she stepped into the range box, ear protection on, gloves tight. Logan stood beside her, calm and patient. He placed a standard issue rifle in her hands, the same kind he'd handed her that first day. "This time," he said, "you're not reacting. You're choosing." She held the weapon firmly. It felt different, now not like a threat, but like a tool. Her breath was steady. Her stance mirrored what she'd seen SEALs use. "On. You," Logan said. Emily exhaled and pulled the trigger. The first shot rang out. Then another. Then another. Her aim wasn't perfect, but it wasn't terrible either. By the end of the session, she had hit center mass on 7 out of 10 rounds. "Not bad," Logan said, clearly impressed. "Good for a contractor?" She teased. "Good for anyone," he replied. Afterward, they sat on the tailgate of the Humvee in silence. The stars began to appear overhead, scattered across the desert sky like dust. "You ever wonder what your life would look like if things had gone differently?" she asked. "All the time," he replied. "But then I remember, I survived this long for a reason." Emily nodded. "Maybe that's what this place is for. Second chances." "Maybe," Logan said, then turned to her. "What are you going to do with yours?" She didn't answer. Not yet, but for the first time in years, she wasn't running from something. She was moving toward it. The next morning, Emily handed in the signed invitation form. Command accepted her request. She would begin the civilian shadow training program the following week. That night, Logan stood with her at the wall one last time. They ran their hands along the concrete, the job she came to do, and the one that led her somewhere unexpected. "You came here to build," Logan said. "Turns out, you were the one being rebuilt." Emily smiled. "I thought I was broken." He looked at her, eyes steady. "You were just unfinished." The wind carried dust across the range, and the base lights flickered on as darkness settled. She didn't know what training would bring. She didn't know if she'd make it through. But she knew this. She wouldn't flinch. Not anymore. The desert sun rose slowly over Camp Fallon, painting everything in orange and gold. Emily stood in front of the mirror in her temporary barracks, tying her hair back into a tight braid. Her civilian-issued training fatigues were stiff, the boots still unbroken. She looked like someone playing soldier, but her eyes told a different story. There was no doubt anymore. She belonged. The civilian shadow training program was intense. While she wasn't part of the SEAL team, Emily trained alongside them, learning tactics, endurance, mental focus. Her body ached daily. Her hands blistered. Yet every morning she showed up earlier than expected. Logan Hawley observed her quietly from a distance. He saw how she adapted, not just to physical drills, but to the rhythm of military cohesion. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was learning for herself. That was rare. One afternoon, during a drill involving hostage extraction, Emily was assigned to the observation tower, tracking targets using drone telemetry. The instructor doubted she'd be much help. She proved him wrong in 10 minutes flat. 2 heat signatures approaching from the east. Not friendly, one armed, one with a decoy pack, she reported calmly. Confirmed, the team lead said in his comms. Engaging. After the drill, the instructor shook her hand. You have the eyes of someone who's seen more than we think. I've been watching people fall apart most of my life, she replied. Figured it was time to help them stay together. By week 3, Emily's name was on the board alongside reserve operators for her analytical skills and her performance under pressure. It wasn't about rank or medals. It was about being part of something real. One night, as the trainees sat around the mess hall fire pit, swapping stories, one of the younger SEAL candidates asked her the question they'd all wondered. Why'd you come back after fixing the wall? She looked into the flames. Because walls can't protect people forever. Sometimes people have to become the wall. Silence followed until someone clapped softly. Then more joined in. Even Logan. That night, he found her walking alone near the training yard. You know, we joked once that you were more steel than concrete, he said. I remember, she smiled. You've proven it. They stood in silence for a moment before he added, There's something else. He handed her another envelope. Inside, a letter from Naval Command. Emily read it slowly. They were offering her a full-time, civilian tactical analyst position attached. Directly to active SEAL units in the field. It wasn't combat. But it was close. She'd be using her instinct, observation, and judgment to help missions succeed and save lives. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say yes. Logan replied. She looked at the seal at the top of the letter, then at Logan. Only if I get to choose my first posting. He raised an eyebrow. And where would that be? Wherever you're going. Logan's smile was the first real one she'd seen from him. Then it settled. 3 months later, Emily stood aboard a Navy transport, flying with SEAL Team Delta toward a secure outpost. She wore her analyst gear, no longer an outsider, no longer hiding behind a construction vest. When the turbulence hit mid-flight, she didn't flinch. When the red light blinked above the cabin door, signaling a rapid deployment, she remained calm. And when one of the SEALs leaned over, handed her a sidearm just in case, she accepted it, checked the safety, and nodded. It was a silent trust now. She didn't need to prove anything. She was no longer just fixing things. She was part of something built to last. The mission went flawlessly. No lives lost. Thanks to intel Emily had spotted during briefing that others overlooked. As the team boarded the chopper to head home, Logan leaned close and said, You've saved more than walls now. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. When they returned to Camp Fallon, a new name had been added to the civilian tactical wall. Carson, E. Civilian Operator Class -. It wasn't an award. It was a reminder that even when the world breaks down, some people rise up. Emily had walked into Camp Fallon a contractor. She left it something else entirely. Because sometimes, all it takes to become extraordinary is a single moment of courage and a man handing you a rifle.